former Baptist. So Cherokees believed in polygenesis, which means they believed that God made more people than just Adam and Eve when he created the world, that he made the red people and put us in North America because it was the best place and we were his favorites. That he made white people and put them in their area, that he made Black people and put them in Africa. And to each one, he gave a special gift. He gave the great book to the white people. He gave us bows and arrows for hunting. And he gave hoes and axes for agriculture to the Black people in Africa. The Cherokees believe that all the trouble in the world started when the white people started leaving where they were supposed to be and going into the rest of the country or the rest of the world and disturbing things. I hope this isn't offending anybody. I'm just relaying information. The first missionaries were really astonished to discover that the Cherokee felt this way, and that they thought their religion and their lifestyle and their culture was far superior to what the white people were offering. The three great stumbling blocks that Cherokees had for Christianity was its failure to address the basic issues of corporate harmony. Like we talked about in the last lesson, everybody helped everybody. Cherokees were governed by consensus. Everybody had a voice. Women were included. They accepted all people. So they didn't understand why Christianity separated that and made women less than and judged two-spirit people. They didn't address bountiful harvests or how to prepare for that or how to thank the spirits for that. And they were really against sacred healing. The white people and missionaries especially started to forbid Cherokees from performing our healing ceremonies because they thought it was evil, that it was satanic, even though we've been doing it for years, and it was basically using plants to heal. Cherokees actually had cures for all the diseases that were known to them before the introduction of smallpox and the other diseases that came from Europe. So these were things that worked. These were how we'd always healed people. And so to be told that suddenly this is evil was not acceptable to us. And they also didn't understand, given the harmony of everyone working together, they didn't get the whole Christianity idea that it was an individual thing, that you were responsible for your relationship with God, and that he would punish you if you didn't do what he told you to do, but you didn't have to relay that to other people. You didn't have to relay, in their view, the love of Jesus and the sacrifice of Jesus was up to each individual person to accept, but they didn't see that that love was spread to other people, if that makes sense. They saw Christianity as competitive, materialistic, and aggressive, and very at odds with the communal religion that we practiced. And it was also, like I said, about medicine. It was weird to the Cherokee that Europeans separated medicine from spirituality. And as we're learning today, more and more, that is an integral part of the healing process for everybody. You being in a loving space, having some form of spirituality for most people, helps you recover more quickly, and even if you don't recover, it helps you as you're passing into the next life to have that communal situation. The Cherokees never murdered a missionary, but they did threaten to a couple of times. They sometimes stoned missionaries and their converts, and that there was a huge separation between mixed bloods, which is what I would be considered, and full bloods. And generally, full bloods maintained the traditional ways and the traditional spirituality. Mixed bloods were more open to accepting Christianity and instituting laws that forbade traditional practices, which made the full bloods mad. So there was this conflict constantly. By 1860, about 12% of the Cherokee Nation claimed membership in one or other of the 5 Protestant denominations. Those denominations were Moravian, Congregationalist, Presbyterian, Baptist, and Methodist. But others in opposition of that started joining, there were anti-missionary rebellions. There was a revival of the ghost dance, or not a revival, but institutionalizing the ghost dance, which a medicine man said he had a vision and the Cherokees needed to return to their traditional ways. And the ghost dance was a way for Cherokees to pray to the Great Spirit for forgiveness for considering Christianity. So of course, the ghost dance was seen as evil by the missionaries, and the missionaries and the government started forbidding people from participating in ghost dances. So they had to go underground. Let's see. And several Cherokee were converted, got into the church, and were told that their lifestyle was evil. And about 50% of the people that were converted left and went back to traditional beliefs. After the Moravians came and failed, the Presbyterians sent this guy named Gideon Blackburn. He built 2 schools. He promised them he'd build 5, but he only got 2 built. And he did okay at first, but he made the mistake of getting involved in tribal politics. Which, as someone who worked for different chiefs, I can tell you that's never a good thing to get involved in tribal politics. He was expelled because he urged mixed blood Cherokees to push through laws through their tribal councils to outlaw all those things that are traditional. And he wanted to outlaw polygamy, birth control, matrilineal inheritance, and enforce Christian marriage, paternalism, and observance of the Sabbath. And like we talked about in the last lesson, we traced our genealogy through our mothers. The women owned property or were over the property. It was their decision what happened to that property and who inherited it. So to change all that, again, was disrespectful in the Cherokees' view and didn't make a lot of sense, because you always know who your mother is. You sometimes don't know who your father is, but you always know who your mother is. And that's why they had that system set up. So in 1809, this Blackburn guy undertook a secret mission for the federal government, and selling alcohol on native lands was against the law. But somehow he had figured out, devised, he had set up stills and was manufacturing moonshine. And somehow he told the government, I'm going to go undercover and see who's going to buy this, and then you can arrest them. And so, but he was going to make profit and keep the profit. It was very, very confusing idea. And the last time he was seen was sailing down the Coosa River to go into the Creek Nation because the Cherokees had expelled him. And I don't know what the Creeks ended up doing to him. I think they attacked his boat and stole all his liquor and did away with him. After that, the American Board of Commissioners on Foreign Missions in 1818 sent their missionaries in. They claimed to be interdenominational, but they were really Congregationalists. And their first mission was at Chickamauga in Tennessee. And a side note, there are so many places in the Southeast that are named after Cherokee words. Tennessee is one of them. That state is based on the Cherokee town Tennessee, which was in eastern Tennessee. If you ask people in Tennessee that, they probably don't know it, because that's not related, but that's where that name came from. By 1830, the Congregationalists had listed 8 mission statements. Somehow I put alpha instead of A, that's weird. They listed mission stations, most of which included schools and churches. So progressively, all the missionaries that came in accomplished a little bit more than the previous missionaries. The Congregationalists did help the nation fight the federal government insistence that we be removed to the West, but they also started and continued friction with the full bloods. They were trying to destroy the influence of Cherokee priests and medicine men, and in Cherokee we call our medicine men Adonishki. By 1825, the whole nation was divided into Christians and traditionalists. And when Cherokees converted, the pastors forbid them from participating in any tribal ceremony. They couldn't do the green corn dance. They couldn't go to ring making ceremonies. They couldn't play stickball. They couldn't go to a traditional doctor. The missionaries didn't offer any other kind of health care. They just told the Cherokees, you can't do this. In Achota, which is a town in northeast Georgia, and at one time was the capital of the Cherokee Nation, 8 local chiefs demanded that Reverend Isaac Proctor be removed because he was dividing the people. He was preaching that Christians were better than pagans. Now, this is convoluted and twisted. He was preaching that Christians were better than pagans, and it was causing the slaves that the Cherokees owned to be disrespectful and not do as they were told. So think about that for a second. We're complaining that Christianity is a white person's institution, but we have slaves.
Yeah.
And we're mad because our slaves are acting up because you're saying this in the church. Not all Cherokees owned slaves. It was mostly the larger landowners, mostly in northeast Georgia. There was some in western North Carolina, but it was less prevalent here than it was in Georgia. And all of that was part of Cherokees trying to Americanize themselves so they wouldn't be removed to the west. In 1827 in Taloni Town, some converts burned the council house to the ground. Then the traditionalists said they were going to burn the church and the schools to the ground. The chiefs stepped in and maintained calm, but Christians were barred for participating in the annual purification ceremonies of the Cherokees. So if you became a Christian, you couldn't go to green corn. Per the Cherokees, not the priests, the Cherokees are now forbidding people from participating in ceremonies. By the 1820s, the Baptists and Methodists had joined the missionary work in the nation. And from 1824 to 1827, Whitepath, who was another one of our chiefs, led a rebellion to oppose the rapid acculturation that was occurring. Councils were passing laws encouraging a market economy and catering to the missionaries by continuing to outlaw traditional Cherokee practices and rituals. In LJ, these group of 8 chiefs had a council of their own, and it was illegal, wasn't approved by the Cherokee Nation as a whole. Thousands of people, traditional people, showed up. They did, for a week or two, they did traditional dances and ceremonies and passed their own laws, reinstituting the traditional Cherokee ways. This movement peaked in 1827 because the threat of removal was becoming not just a threat, but an actual possibility. And so the Cherokees kind of put aside their differences to address that major, very frightening problem. At first, missionaries opposed removal, which the Cherokees appreciated, and they helped fight removal. Mostly because they had built schools and churches and built lives here, so they had financial investment in the community. So they didn't want to see those things go away. They backed off after 1832 because a third wave of traditionalism surged through Cherokee country, because obviously the missionaries and us trying to become white people was not working. We were still going to be removed. So a lot of people turned back to traditionalism as a way to, we felt like we had turned away from the Great Spirit and the Creator, and from our ways that we were supposed to be doing that He gave us in the first place. So we returned to traditionalism. And the missionaries never gained the support they had previously after that third wave. From 1835 to 1837, the removal treaty was illegally signed in 1835. Removal actually happened in 1838. So this is up until about a year before removal happened. For 3 nights, the Cherokee held a medicine dance at Old Josiah's, and it was the 4th and last principal one of revelry. The tyranny of the white majority and Jacksonian democracy overwhelmed the good intentions of both the missionaries and the Cherokees. And that's a quote from William McLaughlin. Some missionaries did earn the respect of the Cherokee and treated them as equals. And again, I want to say there's always good people and bad people. It's not all, Cherokees are all good and white people are all bad. a lot of Black people helped us throughout this whole process, and that's one of the reasons the EBCI is still here today. Reverend Daniel Buttrick of the American Board arrived in 1818 and lived with the Cherokee family to learn the language. That was very important to the Cherokee, as you can imagine, that he would take that time to do that. He publicly opposed removal and remained in the East with the Cherokee, who refused to accept the fraudulent removal treaty of 1835. On the eve of the forced removal at Bayonet Point, he led his congregation in excommunicating those Cherokee who had signed the treaty of removal. He declared that no Christian could condone betrayal of the nation, and no Christian church should have fellowship with these people. In 1823, the Methodist Circuit Riders became really popular with the Cherokee. 3 of them married Cherokee women and by tradition became members of the tribe and were treated as members of the tribe. Methodist missionaries were also admired for their public attacks on Jackson's removal policy. In late 1830, all 8 Methodist Circuit Riders signed and published a protest against this policy. But several were arrested, and instead of receiving report or support from the Methodist Mission Board, they were rebuked. This caused them to desist from their public fight against removal. And James J. Trott, who was one of them, was so disgusted with his denomination that he left and joined another one. And Methodism lost a lot of support because of this. Reverend Evan Jones, a missionary from the Northern Baptists, didn't know there was such a thing, from 1821 until his death in 1872, made more converts for his denomination than anyone else. He worked chiefly with full-bloods, sided with the great majority against Jackson, walked with the Cherokee on the Trail of Tears, and served as chaplain in one of their regiments during the Civil War. He was admitted as a full member of the tribe for his lifelong service.
Oh yes, Northern Baptists, or as an American Baptists, we used to say in divinity school, those are the Baptists that can read and write. But now we say those are the ones who think women have brains and voices.
Cherokees. As you can imagine, removal was a shock to the Cherokees on every level. We didn't really think it was going to happen because we tried so hard to Americanize ourselves, and a lot of Cherokees owned property, had plantations. Not that that's a good thing because they enslaved people, but spoke English well, sent their kids to American schools, did everything. We changed the way we dressed, changed the way we talk, cut our hair, did all those things to try to prevent removal. And even though that's what the federal government wanted us to do, when we actually did it, it didn't make a bit of difference. So, like most indigenous people, our religion, our spirituality is all based on place. Our language is based on place. So when you pick up a culture like that and move it thousands of miles to, I've never been to Oklahoma. I imagine it's flat and not pretty like it is here. And so, of course, the plants we used as medicine were not there. The dances based on the seasons were different. I mean, the seasons don't look the same out there as they do here. So I don't know how to explain that to help you understand, but just think about you're picked up and moved to Mars. You don't have anything on Mars that you have on Earth. You don't have the clothes that you wear. You don't, people are dead. Thousands of people died on the Trail of Tears. So that, which is, part of the purpose of doing that. But it's hard for me to comprehend, having grown up in Western North Carolina and having grown up in Cherokee and having had access to all these cultural things and the language and the dances, to imagine that I could just be picked up and moved to Oklahoma. First of all, hell on earth for me. But, I can't fathom that. I can't get that in my head. But a new sense of Cherokee identity evolved from 1839 to 1855 that provided the basis for a major political revolt of the full bloods against the mixed bloods. Key elements were a combination of popular Christianity and a new tolerance for traditional dances, sports, and folkways. So for the Cherokees that remained in Western North Carolina, started kind of combining Christianity with traditional Cherokee. Okay, you can be a Christian and you can play stickball. So that increased the membership in these denominations. The Cherokees that converted to Christianity started melding the Christian God with the Cherokee idea of a great spirit. Their social ethic of sister brotherhood and their consensual method of decision-making was combined with the European concept of consent of the governed. So we started electing tribal councils and chiefs rather than selecting them from the community and ruling by consensus. But by 1860, no more than 12 to 15% of Cherokees were actually Christians. And many still practice the Cherokee concept of gadugi, which we still practice today. And that concept is, if somebody dies, all the men in the community go dig the grave for the family. If an elder is unable to take care of their garden in the summertime, community members will go plow up the garden, plant whatever the elder wants, take care of it throughout the summer and harvest and put up the food for the elder at the end of the harvest season. That has changed a little bit in Cherokee because now we have tribal programs that do a lot of that stuff. So we're kind of hurting ourselves with that concept because people are starting to think that the government should do everything for them and that we don't have to take care of ourselves. That's something we're trying to fight. There is still a sense of gadugi. Recently, very sadly, we had a young person, she was in elementary school, fought cancer 2 or 3 different times. Finally, the cancer, she succumbed to it. But the families, the food that was taken, there was, before she passed, there was a dance at the Cherokee Youth Center so she could have that experience before she passed. There was a parade in her honor. So all the entire tribe came out and, you know, fed the family, took care of them and continued to take care of them. And so even in that horrible situation, there's that community support. And that's a good thing that we continue to do. The Baptist and Methodist preachers allowed more latitude in judging who should be a church member, and they were less strict on their discipline when people slipped, which is not true today. The Baptists allowed each congregation to choose its own pastor. Both made use of camp meetings with lively preaching, loud hymn singing, and emotional excitement, and it stirred up crowds of hundreds and lasted for several days. The Congregationalist Presbyterians and Moravians didn't like the way Baptists and Methodists worshiped, so they kind of withdrew from Cherokee country. And Baptist and Methodist denominations grew steadily from 1840 to 1860, and they're still the dominant denominations in Cherokee today. Baptists more so than Methodists. Methodists have kind of fallen off, but we have something like 18 different Baptist churches in the town of maybe 13,000 people. And a lot of times, we were talking about this last night, in the Baptist churches there, somebody will get mad because they disagree with the concept, so they'll go start a church. And then there's another church out of that, and it's because people are not getting along rather than, hey, God has told me that we have a need for another church, you know. So where are we at? Almost out of time. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I hope that helps see how Cherokees worship traditionally and how Christianity came in and changed that and how we've kind of melded these things. One of the things, and I have these discussions with my mother. So my great-grandfather, Van Daly Bradley, came from Eastern Tennessee into Cherokee sometime in the mid-1800s when all this was going on. He was a Baptist preacher. He had 5 different wives that we can count. He may have had more. The wives passed, not mysteriously, they just, you know. So I'm kin to just about everybody in Cherokee, thanks to Van Daly, because I have half cousins and have this. We have a book about that sick of everybody that we relate. My father, my grandfather, his mother only spoke Cherokee. I'm not sure how she and Van Daly communicated. I don't know that how much Cherokee he knew. But my grandfather was sent to a boarding school in Pennsylvania. And when he came back, he married, he actually met my grandmother in Pennsylvania, married her and eloped and came back to Cherokee, had 9 kids, one of who was my father, who was also a Baptist minister. So 3 generations of Baptist ministers in my family. So my mother was not happy when I switched to becoming an Episcopalian. But I was sitting and listening to my mother and my sister talk about their church, and not judging, I hope this doesn't sound judgmental, but that concept of women have to wear dresses, women can't speak in church, men have to put moves forward to get anything done in the church. That's so weird to me now. It was kind of weird to me growing up as well, but especially as a Cherokee, that's not how we do things. We don't denigrate women. We're not supposed to be denigrating women. So my mom and I have these discussions all the time about those things. Yes, ma'am.
I don't think Baptists believe in dancing.
No, which was really weird to me because when I was a dancer, my father was very supportive.
Did it come out of that? And Border Baptist, the predominant Baptist
Yes,
congregation?
yes, they're predominantly Southern Baptists. There's a lot of missionary Baptists, and my family were always independent Baptists. We weren't, which I didn't understand as a kid. My mom, we got into an argument about that. It's like, we're in the South, we're Baptists, we're Southern Baptists. No, we're not. So,
You mentioned before the Civil War, between the various Baptist groups.
yes, ma'am.
Either in the past or the present day, that like they're equal parts, the Cherokee spirituality and Christianity. That kind of are,
I don't, it's either or in most cases. Growing up at our house, we weren't taken to traditional dances. We did go to Indian doctors, Cherokee doctors sometimes, depending on what was wrong with us. But I didn't grow up with that experience of going to green corn and those kind of things. And my mother obviously still, I love her to death, but I don't mean to, I'm disrespectful, but she's 88 and she grew up in a very different time. And so she's you have to be Christian, you don't do these things, and you don't go to powwows, and you don't go to green corn, and you don't learn traditional dances and all that stuff. So there's still that friction between what's traditional and what's Christian. And there's not really a lot of meeting in the middle. Yes, sir.
There are some churches that in Alvarez, they're very traditional, kind of new wave kind of thing. And so, but they're never really an affiliation with a major church. It's just a great church. And there's a couple there, but like the official thing is rid of the old teachings.
And traditionalists are as gung-ho about what they believe as Christians are about what they believe. So it's hard to get a lot of people together to discuss how those two things might, you might be able to do both. Yes, sir.
Mahatma Gandhi of India agreed with the Cherokees. He said he liked Christianity, but he didn't like Christians. So you got a point in India.
All the way on the other side of the
Yeah.
world. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, the Episcopal Church, you remember here, it got come about, and it's a very kind of, if you don't want to explain, it's okay, but,
Oh,
I don't want to put you on a spot or anything, but that has been my question ever since.
Growing up as a gay person in Cherokee was challenging. I wasn't bullied like a lot of kids are, like with physical abuse and things like that. I felt more bullied in church and hearing constantly that you're evil and you're going to go to hell if you're gay. And even before I knew I had the word for gay, I knew I was different, and that was bad. So, like a lot of gay people, we're very spiritual, but we're not allowed to be spiritual in the Baptist church. We're not allowed to be included. So I always had difficulty and a lot of guilt about being gay, being Christian. I would be one or I would be the other. And for most of up until I was about 35, I went back and forth. I was in church when I was 35 and the preacher was preaching about how gay people were awful and they were going to hell. And I got up and left and I never went back. Like, I can't hear this anymore. I don't feel that. I don't believe it. You know, I have a relationship with God. I'm not perfect. I know I sin and stuff, but it's not because of this. This is part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it's part of who I am. So I left church for years, about 20 years. I don't know if when we first started church here, my partner, Michael, and I started coming here. He moved to Asheville from Atlanta. I met Michael and we had been dating for a while. And he said, my spirituality is really important to me. If you want to go with me, that's great. I'm not going to force you to. You're welcome to come at any time. So for the first year or so, I didn't go to church with him. Also because he was an Episcopalian. But he went to St. Catherine's in Marietta, Georgia. And I don't know why. One day I was like, okay, I'll go with you today. And I walked in that church and I felt welcome like I had never felt before. Everybody in the church was involved. Women were taking part, men were taking part. The youth had things to do. Everybody was included. Everybody was welcoming. And I really felt like that's what Jesus meant when he started the church in the first place. He didn't differentiate between, you know, men can only do this and women can only do that. Everybody had something to do, just like Cherokee culture. You know, everybody is valuable. Everybody has something to contribute. Even if it's just coming to church on Sunday and having a presence there. And after church, people came up and shook my hand and welcomed me. And that had never happened before. And so I was like, hey, whoa, this is amazing. And so I started going to church with Michael every time I was in Georgia. And when he was up here, we would find an Episcopal church to go to. And so it was life-changing for me to find the Episcopal church. And I think that God put Michael in my life for many reasons, but for that one in particular. So, and I've learned more, but I've studied more. I spend more time in the Bible. I spend more time praying because I feel like God has revealed himself to me and continues to do that in a way that wasn't available to me previously. So I'm thankful, very thankful.
Thank you.
It's interesting that the Cherokee experience is different from other Native peoples because Anglicanism and Episcopalianism became very important with certain other Native peoples. Joseph Grant, for instance, was a very devout Anglican layman and translated the Book of Common Prayer into Mohawk. And the Loria family among the Lakotas, he was suffragan bishop.
It seems like the Western tribes, Midwestern and Western tribes, were more Catholic and Episcopalian than those of us in the Southeast.
But the Mohawks, of course, were Iroquois.
Yeah. Actually, Cherokee's, our language is related to the Iroquois language. So, yes, sir.
What role do you see the church playing in the future of the band, if any?
This is also a really cool story. When I was confirmed in the church by Bishop Jose, I got a call like 3 days later. My friend Trey Adcock, who's Cherokee Nation, teaches at UNC Asheville. He said, I got a call from the Bishop Church and they want to reach out to the tribe and, you know, just make some connections. And I told him that you were probably the better person to do that. So less than a week after I got confirmed, I was in the bishop's office having a conversation about connecting. And because I was on the chief staff, I was fortunate enough to be able to set up that meeting. And, you know, introduce them, and they had a lot of stuff to talk about. And as far as I know, they're still in contact.
The dialysis program that we attended. Right, out of the
Yeah.
and so there's information there and effective, but I didn't know if it
When I talked to the bishop, he didn't want to come in and say, we're gonna come solve your problems, we're gonna convert all the Cherokee. He mostly just wanted to have a conversation. And if he told the chief, if there's a place for us to assist, then we're happy to do that, you know, let us know. And they just continued to have conversations. Unfortunately, there was a very small Episcopal church in Cherokee for many years. And the lady that owned the property became very difficult to work with. And so the church was shut down. The bishop said the church has not been deconsecrated yet, and they still have all the things that go into a church in storage. But I've been checking on that, but the building now has been empty for so long, and it was an old building to start with. It's dilapidated. So we had hoped that that might be a possibility to maybe, you know, start having services there. I am working with the bishop. We've had several conversations, and Scott as well. There's a huge homeless, there's, as like most communities, there's a drug problem in Cherokee, and a lot of our people are homeless. Not a lot. A lot of our younger people that are drug users are homeless, and there's, even though the tribe passed to build a homeless shelter, that's not been done yet, and that's been years, like at least 5 years ago. So I'm concerned about that, you know, it's easy to judge people that get on drugs, but we've had that in our family. Actually, everybody in Cherokee has had that in their family. And it's an issue and a problem, and so we need to address, we need to protect the people that are incapacitated, whatever they need as far as help, getting clean and staying off drugs, job training programs, education, all that kind of stuff. So we are gonna have, we had a primary election last Thursday. The current chief and Michelle Hicks, who was chief for 12 years, a couple of years ago, are the two candidates that got through as chief. And, you know, I worked well with both of them. So I'm hoping that there might be a place, and if Michelle goes back in as chief, there might be a place for me to oversee something like that. And I certainly want to use the Church of the Advocate as a example and a model of what we can do to not judge people and to help them. So.
Well, we are so out of time. But you can stay and ask him a question after. We are so grateful for you sharing all of this with us, and that we have this relationship, and for the role you're playing in that. Thank you. Yeah. Go in peace. It was.